Now, you might know Robert Griffin is a very unlucky quarterback due to having injuries derail his career, almost as unlucky as Tyrod Taylor, who has had pretty much the same thing happen to him. But since RG3 had one of the most unfortunate injuries in the wildcard round of the playoffs against the Seahawks, to where he tore his MCL, LCL, and I think his meniscus as well, and that pretty much ruined the rest of his career. And since RG3 got injured in his second season, and would go on to miss most of the 2013-14 season due to those injuries that happened in the playoff game, I decided to take his entire team, well, I guess the starters, from the 2013 and 14 team and put him here and see how he would have impacted them if he played all of the games. And injuries are off as well, so no one will get injured in here. And this took about 7 hours to make only the starters for this. I didn't make any backups at all. And everything is right from like the height, the numbers, the names, the weight, the experience, and the college. The only thing that may be wrong is the contract years. Like, I got the correct contract length, but I'm not sure about all the years. But other than that, that really shouldn't impact much. But all you need, like the names, the age, the position, is good. And also for the elusiveness stat, which just became change of direction, I gave them whatever they had, or gave them the closest to it, because some of the defenders, like most of the defensive tackle and D linemen, would have ended up having like 12 change of direction, so I just left it at whatever they had when I made the players. So some people suffer from that, and others really benefit from not having 12 change of direction, because change of direction is a very important stat, so I decided to either give them what they had if they had high change of direction, or just not do anything at all if it was very, very low. Now it's time to see how this roster would have actually done if Robert Griffin III never got injured and was able to play the full season. I mean, they just made it to the playoffs, so I have a feeling this team can make a deep playoff run. And at the end of year one, we go 5-12 and miss the playoffs. Robert Griffin ended up having 4,400 yards, 26 touchdowns to 8 picks, pretty solid, but getting sacked 43 times is not good at all. Looks like we have some major work to do on the offensive line. Alfred Morris had 1,000 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. RG3 also tacked on 284 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. And I'm going to try to do something about them using the backups, but I really can't because they'll always have like a third down back that they'll use. Even if I put the full back, some real players will still get some touches, but no, whatever. As long as they make the playoffs, I can't be mad at them. But we missed horribly, so I can this year. Pierre Garçon had 1,237 yards, 8 touchdowns. Santana Moss had 918 yards, 5 touchdowns. And Josh Morgan only had 853 yards, but 3 touchdowns as well. Fred Davis also tacked on 831 yards and 5 touchdowns. It looks like Tyler Plumbus, the right tackle, ended up letting up a bunch of sacks. I know tackle's the hardest position, but I kind of expected more from Trent Williams than letting up 11 sacks. Brandon Merriweather led the team in tackles with 103. Defensive tackle Barry Cofield led us in 14 TFLs, and Ryan Kerrigan had 3.5 sacks. This is one of the most pathetic, amount of sacks I've ever seen. The highest was only 3.5. No other player had more than 3 sacks. Brandon Merriweather also led the team in interceptions with 3. Kerrigan tacked on 2, and Josh Wilson also had 2 as well. Kai Forbath had 14 made field goals on 17 attempts, 82% completion, and his longest was 55. He only missed 1 extra point, 46 made, 47 attempted, and our punter had 2,600 yards. Well, I guess at least we led the league in something. Ryan Kerrigan had the only safety in the entire league. And Lamar Jackson does actually end up winning MVP. The Chiefs only lose 1 game. And Robert Griffin actually was 6th in the MVP voting. That's showing a little bit of promise at least. RG3 was also 4th for the Offensive Player of the Year award. And I'm going to go until RG3 retires. So it doesn't matter if he's the only one left from this team still playing in the league. Once he retires, that's when I'll end the video. And looking at the players we have to re-sign are a bunch. Actually, most of these guys we have to end up resigning. And we have to pay Brian Arakpo $82 million. I'm going to do it because he's the highest player on our team. Plus, I really like him because I had a playoff card, I think it was in Ultimate Team a year or 2 ago. That card was just amazing. Okay, no, the game is just glitched because he's here, but he's also over here. At year 2, we missed the playoffs yet again, but we've been improved to 7-10. Somehow the Cowboys end up going 14-3. RG3, 4,600 yards, 32 touchdowns, 12 picks, sacked 43 times. Alfred Morris with a huge increase this year, getting up to 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, and only one fumble. Our fullback Darrell Young had 249 yards, 7 touchdowns himself, and RG3 tacked on 181 yards with 4 touchdowns. Pierre Garçon again another 1,000-yard season, 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns. The tight end Fred Davis, 969 yards, 9 touchdowns. Some random guy, because Santana Moss probably retired because he was old as crap. And Tyler Plumbus let up 15 sacks this time. I think we're quickly seeing what needs to be replaced on the O-line. Brian Orakpo led the team, like the 2013-14 Washington team, in tackles with 102 tackles. Ryan Kerrigan had 8 TFLs. And this guy, who was not on that team, just some random guy I guess they ended up signing, 15.5 sacks, but Ryan Kerrigan had 6, Orakpo 5. At least they did increase. At least we have 4 people with over 3 sacks this time. And Josh Wilson ends up getting 5 interceptions. Kai Forbath went 18 for 19 on his field goals with a long of 56. And 51 of 52 on extra points. And his only extra point that was missed ended up getting blocked. And our punter had 50 punts for 2,400 yards. Tom Brady had almost 6,000 passing yards this year. Mahomes also going crazy with 44 touchdowns. Brady led the league in picks. That's kind of weird. Nick Chubb had almost 2,000 rushing yards for 23 touchdowns, and Josh Jacobs had 21. Minnesota Vikings end up losing another Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes takes home the MVP. And here it is last year, because I don't think I showed it. Lamar was obviously MVP. And the Saints actually end up beating the Chiefs somehow. In this offseason, Ryan Kerrigan has upgraded himself to an X Factor, but we're going to have to pay him $153 million. Which should be doable. I just hope we manage to get all these guys to re-sign because, once again, they're all starters. But we do not have to re-sign a bunch of guys this offseason, which is good. And we ended up re-signing actually everyone except for the right guard, Chris Chester, and the punter. And since the punter's 41 and probably just going to retire, I'm just going to go ahead and franchise tag our starting right guard and hope I can sign him to a long-term deal next year. For the 3rd straight year, we have under 10 wins. For the 3rd straight year, we missed the playoffs, going back to 5-12, just like we did the first season. RG3 still around the same, 4,100 yards, 37 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, but only sacked 32 times. Alfred Morris with 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns, no fumbles. RG3 was our 2nd leading rusher, which is not good at all. 271 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and our fullback had 81 yards and 3 touchdowns. This time, this random guy I've never heard of before was actually our leading receiver. Pierre Garçon was 2 yards shy of a 1,000-yard season for the 3rd straight season. He had 998 yards, 8 touchdowns. Fred Davis had 810 and 5 touchdowns. And Trent Williams this time actually allowed the most sacks on our team at 12. And this dude has had the greatest turnaround I think I've ever seen. Because he had, 17 sacks last year that he allowed? Now he's only allowed 3. Orakpo leading the team in tackles again with 114. I thought that was Phillip Rivers for a second. He had 11 TFLs. And Jarvis Jenkins actually led the team with 16. The most sacks was Orakpo at 8, followed by Chris Baker and Jarvis Jennings. Ryan Kerrigan fell off this year. Kai Forbath went 13 for 15 on his kicks, with a long of 53, and 55 for 56 on extra points, and once again, his only missed extra point was blocked. Oh, wow, okay, I did not expect to see Sam Darnold throw 50 touchdowns to only 9 picks, but also 4,300 yards. Where's this Sam Darnold? I want to have that Sam Darnold. Ooh, Alex Leatherwood lets up 22 sacks, and Colton Miller let up 20 himself. I want to see how many times Derek Carr got sacked then. Because it has to be an insane amount, because that's 42 with those guys. And surprisingly, he was tied with Gardner Minshew for being sacked the most at 58. Which is incredible because 42 of the 58 sacks came from these 2 players. Joey Bosa ends up breaking the record with 24 sacks. Brian Burns almost came close to breaking the real-life record with 21. That's the first time I think I've seen 3 people with over 20 sacks in the simulation. It's been kind of tame with like 15 and 16, but I guess this time they just decided, alright, that record stood for too long. Okay, Desmond King got 8 interceptions. Brian Arakpo ends up making a Pro Bowl, and it looks like he was the only person on the entire team to make one. Yes. So at least we had one Pro Bowler in Arakpo. Sam Darnold on his 50 touchdown season unfortunately cannot overcome the Kansas City Chiefs. But Lamar, another MVP. I'm pretty sure it's back-to-back. But none of our players anywhere in the playoffs or even in the Pro Bowl since we only had Arakpo. I'm going to try and give him a 6-year deal, see if he'll accept that. Almost a $200 million contract, and he does accept it. Unfortunately, he has not progressed to a 90 or an X Factor. So we're paying all of that money for a superstar quarterback that's not even a 90 overall, but hopefully he will develop and lead this team to a playoff berth. This free agency, we do unfortunately end up losing our right guard, Chris Chester, because he just didn't want to sign any deal, and I had to end up franchise tagging Tyler Plumbus. We went 7-10 and missed out on the playoffs, honestly probably because Dallas ended up going 16-1 somehow. RG3, 4,300 yards, 34 touchdowns, 12 picks, only sacked 28 times. At least his sack numbers, or the amount of times he's being sacked, is going down. We just need to get the yards and touchdowns up. Alfred Morris, 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, 1 fumble. RG3, 310 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Darrell Young, 34 and a touchdown. Pierre Garçon, 970 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. And Fred Davis, 925 yards and 6 touchdowns. And blocking, Trent Williams gave up the most sacks, but only 8. That's still really good. It looks like everyone else is doing solid here, like 5 and 3 from everyone else. Ryan Kerrigan had 8 sacks, Arakpo had 6. And Kai Forbath, 16 of 18 with a long of 55, and he had 1 field goal blocked and perfect on his extra points, 53 for 53. Nick Chubb had another insane year of 1,900 rushing yards and 23 touchdowns. Zeke had 22. These running backs have been having such good seasons of almost 2,000 yards and over 20 rushing touchdowns. And the Bears managed to take home a Super Bowl. Lamar, it has to be his 3rd straight MVP. Okay, no, he has won 3 MVPs, but Mahomes won in 2022. Other than that, he's won back-to-back MVPs. We have to end up resigning 2 big pieces in Alfred Morris and Trent Williams. We got that deal done. Our left end, Jarvis Jenkins, ended up resigning him as well. But Pierre Garçon, our left guard here, Corey, I think you pronounce it Lichtensteiger, I'm not sure. And our right tackle, Tyler Plumbus, all want to leave. And if I had to choose one to franchise tag, it's probably going to be Pierre Garçon, which means we're going to lose our starting right tackle and our starting left guard. Okay, this is just depressing. 4-13, really. 3,900 yards, 22 touchdowns, 10 picks. The sacks are back up, unfortunately. That's probably because we've lost almost our entire offensive line at this point, besides our center and Trent Williams. Alfred Morris declined again heavily, though. 995 yards and only 7 touchdowns. Didn't mean to do that. RG3, 304 yards, 3 touchdowns. And our fullback had 7 yards. Pierre Garçon had 922 yards with 5 touchdowns. Fred Davis had 800 yards for 4 touchdowns. It looks like our Tyler Plumbus replacement is terrible. He let up 12 sacks. And Trent Williams, 7. And Will Montgomery, 9. But it looks like we're going to lose Will Montgomery soon, so we're probably only going to be left with Trent Williams. He's probably going to end up retiring soon. 86 tackles, leading the Washington team. Arakpo with 14 TFLs. Kerrigan, 7.5 sacks. Arakpo, 5.5. Kai Forbath, honestly, really bad. 15 for 24 with a long of 53. He had 1 blocked. And extra points, he was perfect. 34 for 34. What it looks like here is our team is just not scoring at all because he only attempted 34 extra points the entire year. Alright, Nick Chubb had 300 carries for almost 2,500 yards and 21 touchdowns. Perry Riley, who ended up leaving us, I think in like season 1 or 2, he just didn't want to re-sign with us and I had to franchise tag someone else. He ends up leading the entire NFL in tackles at 153. The Colts end up beating the Saints. Jared Goff somehow wins a Super Bowl, and let alone wins Super Bowl MVP. Yeah, no surprise, Nick Chubb wins the MVP, finally dethroning Lamar Jackson from winning almost all of them besides the one year Mahomes won it. That's the first time I've seen a running back win one in a while. but he definitely deserved it after the season he just had. Honestly, no one that important that I had to re-sign that offseason. There weren't many players. There was 3. It was Brian Orakpo, Kai Forbath, and our center, Will Montgomery. I signed Montgomery to a 3-year deal, Kai Forbath to a 4-year deal, and I had to franchise tag Brian Orakpo. So hopefully we can get a contract for him before he decides to leave us, because he's been one of the best players on this team, or at least on the defense with Ryan Kerrigan. I'm just about done with this team, honestly. Just 5-12. Again, RG3, 4,300 yards, 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, got sacked 39 times. At least he's consistent, throws for over 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, and under 10 picks every year. Alfred Morris, 1,500 yards, 21 touchdowns. Honestly, I'd say he's been the best player, because Robert Griffin III has just been average. Brian Orakpo's been okay, and Kerrigan's been solid as well. Pretty much other than that, we've lost every other person on this team, so right now Alfred Morris is definitely the MVP. Alfred Morris also racked on 5 receiving touchdowns for 300 yards. Yeah, he's definitely the best player from this simulation. Our center, Will Montgomery, 10 sacks, and Trent Williams, 4 sacks. Kerrigan had 89 tackles leading that Washington team. Jarvis Jenkins with 15 TFLs, and that guy is not on this team. Brian Orakpo with 5. Ryan Kerrigan with 4.5, and Jarvis Jenkins with 4. 14 from 19, which honestly isn't that good. With a long of 55, he had 1 field goal blocked, 52 of 53 on his PATs. This is pretty weird. Sam Darnold has more touchdowns than Patrick Mahomes and only 9 interceptions. And Daniel Jones has almost as many touchdowns as Patrick Mahomes, only 1 less and less picks than Patrick Mahomes as well. Alright, Zeke. 30 rushing touchdowns. That breaks the record by a little bit. He had 1,800 yards, but I saw Kamara on the Titans, weirdly enough, has 2,000 yards and 18 touchdowns. I mean, Joe Mixon has 23 as well, but that's the highest rushing touchdowns I've ever seen. We actually do have 1 Pro Bowl for Alfred Morris. I guess it's about time, considering he's a 97 overall. But I think it's like the first Pro Bowler we've had in like 3-4 seasons. I think the last one was Brian Orakpo, I believe. We had a repeat Super Bowl matchup, and the exact same scenario happened again. Carolina loses to the Chiefs. Mahomes Super Bowl MVP. Once again, 5-12. I mean, was this the 3rd year in a row 5-12? RG3, 4,400 yards, 33 touchdowns, 12 picks, sacked 31 times. Pretty much the same every year. Alfred Morris, 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns. RG3 had 200 yards, 4 touchdowns. Our fullback, Darrell Young, 89. Rushing yards, 1 touchdown. Trent Williams led up 6 sacks. Will Montgomery only led up 4. Ryan Kerrigan, with 85 tackles, led what remains of that Washington team. Kerrigan also led in TFLs with 13. Ryan Kerrigan also led the entire team with 7.5 sacks. Unfortunately, I did have to let go of Orakpo because it was between him and Jarvis Jenkins. And Brian Orakpo did not want to sign a deal with this team because he signed, I believe, 3 franchise tags in a row. We couldn't get him to sign a long-term deal. I guess he was just sick of losing. And I cannot blame him for that because that's all this team has done. I don't think we've had 1 winning season. If we had like 1 total winning season. Kai Forbath, 13 for 15, long of 54, 54 for 55 extra point. He had 1 blocked. That's the first time I've ever seen someone sacked over 60 times. Poor dude. Oh, and I see Zeke down there had 31 rushing touchdowns. So he broke his own record that he set last year. So Zeke has 61 rushing touchdowns in 2 years. And like over 3,000 yards as well. The Chiefs dominate the Vikings. Poor Vikings, honestly. Every time they've made it to a Super Bowl, they either just get blown out or lose, unfortunately. Mahomes another MVP and another Super Bowl win. And Zeke wins back-to-back MVPs, actually, yeah. I mean, he deserves it. 60 rushing touchdowns in 2 years. I don't know how he managed that, but we've somehow gotten even worse. 3-14. I think it's his first year, or one of his first years with under 4,000 yards, but I mean, honestly, at this point, he sucks. I mean, only 5 more touchdowns and interceptions. The only one who's been honestly truly consistent is Alfred Morris, and like consistently good as well. He's averaging like 14, 15 touchdowns a season and over 1,000 yards as well every season. It's pretty much just the same thing. Ryan Kerrigan leading us in tackles, TFLs, and sacks. Trent Williams not letting up that many sacks. Alfred Morris being the best player and most reliable. And Robert Griffin III, honestly, I'm not sure. Kai Forbath hitting about 70-80% of his field goals, getting one blocked, getting extra points blocked. He's just the same thing at this point. Nothing's really changing. We're just managing to get worse every year, going from 5 wins all the way down to 3 wins. I feel kind of bad for this dude. He's only been in the league for 3 years and been sacked over 100 times in 2 seasons. That might be one of the most lopsided Super Bowls I think I've ever seen in my life. That is just depressing. That is only putting up 3 points in the Super Bowl, and then let alone still getting beat by 41 points as well. Most free agency, we were able to lock down Alfred Morris. I may have overpaid, but he's the best player on this team, so I had to franchise tag Ryan Kerrigan. I kept our center, but we ended up losing the fullback. I don't even want to talk about it at this point. 4-13. I mean, we won one more game. I guess RG3 stepped up a bit, but it's just more of the same. I mean, his interception numbers have gone way, way up. But Alfred Morris, another 1,000-yard season. I really did not expect Alfred Morris to be like the bright spot of this team. I thought it was going to be Robert Griffin. Also didn't expect Trent Williams to give up 17 sacks. Kerrigan, 3.5 sacks. And Jarvis Jenkins, 3. I kind of forgot about him, but I guess he's still here. I'm not sure for how much longer because they're going to retire soon, and I'm pretty sure they don't want to spend the rest of their career on this team that has won 7 games in 2 years. Forbath missed 5 field goals, long of 55. Was perfect for extra points for once. He didn't have one get blocked. Colts win the Super Bowl. Jonathan Taylor, Super Bowl MVP. Dak Prescott wins NFL MVP. That's funny. Urban Meyer's Coach of the Year. He didn't even last 4 weeks in the league, but managed to end up winning Coach of the Year. This offseason was a pretty big one because we had to end up signing and were able to sign RG3, Trent Williams, Ryan Kerrigan, and Jarvis Jenkins. Oh, and Kai Forbath. So, pretty much everyone that is still left on this team we had to re-sign this offseason. Yep, 5-12. I don't know why I expected anything else of this team. But I guess on the positive side, we're back to 5 wins a season. It's not much of a positive, but I guess it's something. Pretty much same stat line, over 4,000 yards, around 29 touchdowns, around 15 picks, sacked almost 50 times. Yeah, Alfred Morris actually has like the worst decline of his entire career here, only barely 1,000 yards and only 9 touchdowns and a fumble as well. Trent Williams let up 16 sacks, and Will Montgomery let up 11. Kerrigan 4 sacks, 8 TFLs. Kai Forbath 75% field goal, 52 of a long, and 100% on his extra points. Ravens beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, Super Bowl MVP. And whoever Reed Brown is for the Steelers won regular season MVP. 6-11, at least this team's showing sign of improvement. Trent Williams led up 10 sacks. Will Montgomery led up 0 sacks, but only played 77 downs. That's probably because he is 40 years old. Ryan Kerrigan, 1 sack, 1 pick, 5 TFLs. It's looking like the end for him. We also lost Alfred Morris in free agent, we lost Alfred Morris to retirement. I probably should have mentioned that, but Kai Forbath with his worst field goal percentage, long of 56, perfect from extra points. And the Chiefs finally go down in the Super Bowl, and it's of course to the Lions, who have never been to a single Super Bowl. Jonathan Summers, just some auto-generated dude, wins Super Bowl MVP. Eric Fowler, I cannot read, for the Colts, and Urban Meyer, again, Coach of the Year. And RG3 turns down our offer and decides to go into free agency. And I'm going to let him. I'm going to let him go into free agency. So maybe he can finally do something. And it looks like Robert Griffin III is going to end up going to Cincinnati. Maybe they can do better. Actually, they did make the playoffs this year, so hopefully RG3 can go over there and get them over the hump and take them to a Super Bowl. And Cincinnati does go 12-5 and makes the playoffs. So for the first time in his career, Robert Griffin III makes the playoffs, obviously in the simulation. because this is after his injury in the playoffs. In real life, he's the starter with less passing yards, less passing touchdowns, same amount of picks, same amount of sacks. So in the first round, they're going up against the 4th-seeded Buffalo Bills. Hopefully, they are not a first-round exit. I mean, that's all I can hope for, is that he finally wins a playoff game. I also don't understand how none of them have progressed at all. Like, with their... Okay, they do end up winning. Barely, but they do end up upsetting the Bills, who are the higher seed. RG3, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. What I was saying there is, like how Alfred Morris just stayed a superstar his entire career. Ryan Kerrigan was the only one who actually progressed into an X Factor, but he just got old and lost it, ended up progressing to a star. And did they beat the Steelers? Yes, they ended up beating the Steelers pretty handily. And now they are up in the conference championship against the first-seeded Chiefs. RG3 had 229, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Like, RG3 has just stayed a superstar. And I'm not sure how Alfred Morris did not progress to an X Factor at all. I guess he just got really unlucky. He was like a 98 overall superstar, I think was his highest. And looks like they are indeed in the Super Bowl. Beat the Chiefs by a field goal, like how Cincinnati did in real life. With 216 yards, 1 touchdown. Mahomes ended up throwing 2 picks. But RG3 leaves Washington in his first year. He's in the Super Bowl against the first-seeded 49ers. And they lose in the Super Bowl. Oh, great. Trey Lance, Super Bowl MVP. Lamar Jackson, regular season MVP. I mean, he got all the way to the Super Bowl just to lose. They were the 5th seed that upsetted the 4th-seeded Bills, beat the 6th-seeded Steelers, and upsetted the 1st-seeded Chiefs. The Bengals missed the playoffs, going 7-11. Just to make this even more disappointing. Yeah, just once again, the exact same thing. He is very consistent, throwing for like 25 to 30 touchdowns, like 8 to 12 interceptions, being sacked around 40 times, and 4,000 yards. Cincinnati goes 9-8, missing out on the playoffs. Back-to-back years. RG3, 3,300, 27, 5, 49. Cincinnati 6-11. And turns out that RG3 left Cincinnati, who missed the playoffs, and went to Carolina, who made the playoffs. So he somehow has crawled his way back into the playoffs. Okay, he had an insane year this time. 4,300 yards, 45 touchdowns, 18 picks, 39 sacks. And they lose in the first round to Detroit. He had 267 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. And he still doesn't even make the Pro Bowl. RG3 never made a Pro Bowl and just had a 45 touchdown season and did not make the Pro Bowl as well. Jacksonville wins their first ever ring, beating Green Bay, a middle linebacker Super Bowl MVP, and Reed Brown, regular season MVP. I guess that loss to Detroit last year in Carolina made Robert Griffin so embarrassed that he decided to go back and join the AFC and join the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, 6-7. Yep, same thing. 4,200 yards, 33 touchdowns, 12 picks, 38 sacks. 67,000 passing yards, 476 touchdowns, 189 picks, and been sacked 645 times. And for rushing, he is 3,800 yards, 32 touchdowns, and only 2 fumbles. And Dallas does the impossible and ends up winning a Super Bowl. After looking through every NFL team's roster twice, I found that Robert Griffin III retires after 17 years. He made the playoffs 2 times. One time he made the Super Bowl with Cincinnati and ended up losing the Super Bowl. The other time he lost in the Wildcard round with the Carolina Panthers to the Detroit Lions. Other than that, he never made a Pro Bowl. Was pretty average, threw for 4,000 yards almost every season. I think there was like 3, maybe 4 seasons he did not throw for 4,000 yards. Pretty consistent around the high 20s to low 30s for his touchdowns. Other than that, made no Pro Bowls. Really just very underwhelming. I mean, he had like 67,000 passing yards and over 400 passing touchdowns, but pretty sure that's just not even enough for the career records. Oh no, he is here. Actually, it turns out that RG3 is 7th all-time in passing yards with 67,628. It turns out RG3 is actually 9th all-time in passing touchdowns with 476.